Can you hear me? Yes, and you can see me as well? Yes, good. So it's now 7 a.m., so I think we'll just start the session. Dear colleagues, good time of the day. It's a pleasure to be with you today to continue to chair this session on Item 4 on SBSTTA-24 provisional agenda, which we began yesterday on synthetic biology, Item 4. So before I reopen the floor for statements, I will give the floor to the Secretariat for some technical reminders. Secretariat, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear colleagues. I would like to remind you just of some technical matters. First of all, regarding the use of the online system, I hope that you had a chance to look at the short video, but just as a reminder that when the chair opens the floor for interventions, and if you wish to speak and the chair has not already indicated that you are in the queue, please press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, which will turn yellow. Your request will be entered in the queue list visible to the chair. When the chair gives you the floor, the moderator will activate your microphone. The status bar will turn red on your computer, and you may start to speak immediately. If the chair gives you the floor to speak and you have not raised your hand button, please, then please press it so the moderator can see you on the list and activate your microphone. If any party encounters connectivity issues that prevent from making statement, they should contact the Secretariat to make alternative arrangements. We would also like to remind participants that the chat box is for brief communication and therefore to keep your remarks here short. The time for statements is limited, as you know, to 3 minutes for parties, 5 minutes for regional groups and major groups, and a clock is provided for you on the screen to help you to manage your time. But please do not speed up your reading, as it will be challenging for interpreters to follow you. Please also note that around mid-session, the chair will announce a 15-minute break. There is no need to log off during this time. So now regarding written versions of your statements. The CBD Secretariat has developed an online application that allows countries and organizations to upload their statements to the meeting page. Again, I hope that you had an opportunity to see the short video. It is highly recommended that participants use this tool instead of emailing their statements, as it helps streamline the meeting process and facilitates the work of the interpreters. Uploading instructions were included also in your priority pass email, along with your dedicated link, which leads you directly to the upload page. A 6-minute instructional video we played this morning, which explaining both how to upload statements and how our online conference system works, and was being played before the meeting, but also at break time. Please be sure to include the name of your country or organization and the agenda item on the first page of the statement that is uploaded. Participants are encouraged to allow their statements to be posted on the meeting page. Please note that statements will be posted online on the meeting page once they have been delivered by the respective party or registered observer, subject to the agreement of the party and observer concerned. The website will be updated accordingly each day. Statements will not be posted in advance of delivery. However, once the agenda item is completed, in the case that not all statements of observers are presented orally because of lack of time, those statements that have been provided in good time will be posted, again, subject to agreement of the observer concerned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Yes, so when we adjourned yesterday, we had the following parties on the list of speakers: Norway, United Kingdom, European Union, Sweden, Finland, Thailand, Austria, Germany, China, Argentina, Malawi, Portugal, Jordan, Chile, Colombia, Italy, Ecuador, Ethiopia, and Cuba. So now we did our best to record those who requested the floor, but if we missed any, you will have the opportunity to request the floor once I reopen the queue. Please do not raise your hand now. Rest assured that all parties will have an opportunity to speak. I will call on the parties in the queue individually, so please raise your hand only when I call your name. And please remember that statements should not exceed 3 minutes, but please speak slowly, regardlessly. I will take the first intervention now from Norway, and I think the Norway statement will be addressed, made from the Bardø city of Trondheim. Norway, please raise your hand. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's correct. I'm in Trondheim right now, and it's a beautiful day here. On to the statement. Norway supports the proposals for decisions that will formalize the process for horizon scanning, monitoring, and assessment of synthetic biology under the Convention in the 2-year interim after COP15. Synthetic biology is a comprehensive field in rapid development with likely far-reaching consequences, the scope of which is not seen at this point in time. The process recommended by COP15 will ensure that an overview of this development is maintained and assessed against the objectives of the Convention and the 2 protocols. Norway supports an appropriate division of labor and good coordination between work under the Convention and the Protocol in order to avoid unclear boundaries and possible duplication. Given that synthetic biology is an important thematic area that needs due and continuous attention under the Convention, Norway has raised the issue of synthetic biology being classified as a new and emerging issue. However, given that we are moving towards a process that will ensure its place in the work under the Convention, we do not see the need to maintain this position at this stage. Norway also does not support a process to review the criteria for new and emerging issues, as this will be a large process that requires a lot of work and would not necessarily be helpful at this point. With regards to living modified organisms with gene drives, we strongly emphasize the importance of thorough risk assessments and the importance of a precautionary approach. We believe that adapted guidance must be developed under the Cartagena Protocol. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Norway. Next on my list is United Kingdom, followed by the European Union and Sweden. United Kingdom, the floor is yours. United Kingdom? Microphone to United Kingdom, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good day to everyone. The UK would like to thank all those who have been involved in the intersessional work on synthetic biology. The RTEG's hard work forms the basis of the Executive Secretary's recommendations, and we are broadly supportive of them. We note that although an analysis of the criteria for identifying new and emerging issues has been done by the ARTEG, SBSTTA has yet to make a decision on this issue. We support the further gathering and sharing of information on developments in synthetic biology and on its positive and negative impacts for the objectives of the Convention. We note the recommendation to establish a multidisciplinary technical expert group. The draft terms of reference suggests that its role will be to assess and report on information gathered with a view to decision-making by COP, COP-MOP and the parties. We would like to explore with SBSTTA the question of what type of decision-making is anticipated. And we would also like to suggest that part of the MTEG's remit should be to identify capacity building needs. The UK notes that the environmental release of engineered gene-drive organisms may have positive and negative impacts on the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Also, that GDOs are living modified organisms and as such are subject to case-by-case risk assessments under the Cartagena Protocol and other national and international regulatory frameworks. The last COP called upon parties and other governments to apply a precautionary approach and to only consider introducing organisms containing engineered gene drives into the environment, including for experimental releases and research and development purposes, when either scientifically sound case-by-case risk assessments have been carried out, or where risk assessment measures are in place to avoid or minimise potential adverse effects as appropriate. We believe that this COP decision still holds and will not support a recommendation which moves away from this approach. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, UK. The next on my list is the European Union, followed by Sweden and Finland. European Union, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for giving me the floor to speak on behalf of the European Union. Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, the European Union supports to continue the work on synthetic biology under the Convention, and we support a process for broad and regular horizon scanning and monitoring and assessing the most recent technological developments in synthetic biology. We support an efficient process that is suitable to identify both the positive and the negative impacts of synthetic biology vis-à-vis the three objectives of the Convention and its protocols. We recognize the work of the ATEC on synthetic biology in describing and analyzing the relevant trends of synthetic biology. We think it's important to aim for an efficient process, and therefore the European Union would like to recall paragraph 7 of decision 14/19 to emphasize the need for a coordinated complementary approach on issues related to synthetic biology. We should also take into account other conventions and relevant organizations who are dealing with synthetic biology. This all to say that we have to avoid a duplication of work. In the recommendation, we agree with the steps as they are described, being information gathering, compiling and synthesizing the information, importantly assessing this information and reporting on the outcomes. We believe that a multidisciplinary approach is needed for this process. However, we are flexible on the exact implementation, but we suggest to clearly describe the role of the different actors and the procedures in the process. Finally, we agree to start with 2 rounds of horizon scanning during the next 2 intersessional periods, and we propose that SBSTTA reviews during its 28th meeting the process and then provides a recommendation in this regard to COP17. To close, I only want to say that we will submit our suggested amendment in written to the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, EU. Next on my list is Sweden, followed by Finland and then Thailand. Sweden, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Sweden would like to thank the Secretariat, the online forum, and the ARTEG on synthetic biology for developing the ideas and recommendations in the SBSTTA documents on synthetic biology. Sweden shares the view of the European Commission and France, and also regards it important to continue the work on CBD's work with synthetic biology. We also support the need to establish a mechanism for horizon scanning of the most recent technological developments in synthetic biology. It is important to establish an efficient horizon scanning process that is suitable to assess and identify the potential positive and negative impacts of synthetic biology vis-a-vis the three objectives of the Convention and those of the Cartagena and Nagoya protocols. We believe that multidisciplinary expertise is needed for the process and support the establishment of a multidisciplinary ad hoc technical group over 2 intersessional periods to contribute to the horizon scanning process as outlined in the SBSTTA recommendations, together with the amendments to the draft recommendations proposed by the European Communion and Portugal. We are flexible with respect to the implementation of the steps in the horizon scanning process, especially the assessment step. Finally, we thank, we thank the German Federal Agency for Nature Conservation for organizing the Vilna meeting, which gave us the opportunity to discuss this issue. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sweden. Next on my list is Finland, followed by Thailand and Austria. Finland, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, Finland would like to thank the SBSTTA Bureau and the Secretariat for organizing this online session of SBSTTA-24. We support the earlier remarks made by France, the European Commission and Sweden, but would like to state the following issues. First, we support a process for broad and regular horizon scanning, monitoring and assessment of the most recent technological developments in synthetic biology and consider document 24-4 a good starting point for discussions. We also support a coordinated and non-duplicative approach on synthetic biology under the Convention and its protocols. Further, strongly we reiterate decision CBD 14/19 and emphasize a precautionary approach with respect to engineered gene drives. With respect to evaluating synthetic biology against the criteria of new and emerging issues as listed in para 12 of decision 9-29, we do not think it is necessary to do further work going beyond ARTEC and SBSTTA-22. More specifically, we support a process that is suitable to assess and identify potential positive and potential negative impacts of synthetic biology vis-a-vis the 3 objectives of the Convention and its protocols. The process should include, as was already stated by the European Commission, the following steps. First, information gathering. Second, compilation, organization and synthesis of the information. 3, assessment of the information. 4, reporting on the outcomes. We think that multidisciplinary expertise is vital for the horizon scanning process. However, we are flexible and with respect to the implementation of the steps in the horizon scanning process, especially the assessment step. Our first option is the establishment of a multidisciplinary ARTEC. However, we are open to views and suggestions by other parties on how to ensure the necessary expertise. Finally, we agreed to start with 2 rounds of horizon scanning during the 2 consecutive intersessional periods where the experts group meets once per intersessional period. And here we, in order to make up with time, we concur with the suggestions made by the European Commission. We will submit our written amendments to the recommendation to the Secretariat. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Finland, and thank you to all of you for being so diligent on time. Next on my list is Thailand, followed by Austria and Germany. Thailand, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thailand recognizes that synthetic biology is one advancement of biotechnology with the potential to encourage the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. According with the objective of the Convention on Biological Diversity, including through the development of genetic information, endangered species breeding, and bringing back animals and plants that have been extinct in the wild. In addition, any utilization of synthetic biology should be in accordance with a precautionary approach, and the monitoring, assessment, and risk management should be based on particular species of concern to minimize the impact with related ecosystem and the environment. Furthermore, assessment of likely impact from an inability to make proper use of the above-mentioned organisms, as well as biosafety assessment and handling of living organisms derived from biotechnology at various levels should be implemented. Additional channels for information exchange between parties regarding technology development, risk assessment, prioritization of criteria for risk from technology, SDN1, SDN2, SDN3, data regarding permission and monitoring of living organisms derived from biotechnology, benefits, and limitation in implementation should also be developed. Thailand take note of the outcome of the RTEC according to COP decision referred in Annex 1 of document CBD/SubStar/24/4 regarding the processes of monitoring, collecting, and assessing synthetic biology technology development as described in Annex 2. Timeframes for each task should be identified, and relevant data should be updated regularly and disseminated via CBD's clearinghouse mechanism. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Thailand. Next on my list is Austria, followed by Germany and China. Austria, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Austria supports previous statements by France, the European Commission, Sweden, and Finland. And in this, we support a process for broad and regular horizon scanning, monitoring, and assessment of the most recent technological developments in synthetic biology. And we consider the working document provided by the Secretariat a good starting point for our discussions. We have a couple of drafting suggestions which we submit to the CBD Secretariat in written form. And the main elements are as follows. We support a coordinated and non-duplicative approach on issues related to synthetic biology under the Convention and its protocols. We propose to recall paragraphs 9 to 11 of Decision 14/19 and emphasize a precautionary approach with respect to engineered gene drives. With respect to evaluating synthetic biology against the criteria of new and emerging issues, as listed in paragraph 12 of Decision 9/29, we do not see the necessity to do further work going beyond RTEC and SubStar 22. We support an efficient horizon scanning process that is suitable to assess and identify the potential positive and potential negative impacts of synthetic biology vis-à-vis the three objectives of the Convention and its protocols, and agree on the suggested steps in the horizon scanning process. We are flexible with respect to the implementation of the steps in the horizon scanning process, especially the assessment steps, but we believe that multidisciplinary expertise is needed for this part of the process. Austria's initial option would be to establish a multidisciplinary ad hoc technical expert group, and the terms as described in the draft recommendation and the terms of reference, and with the modus operandi being the same as those for ad hoc technical expert groups. But we are open to views and suggestions of other parties on how the necessary expertise can be warranted. We are ready to evaluate any other option. It can be flexible on the exact format and procedures for the assessment, as long as the collected information is assessed duly vis-à-vis the three objectives of the Convention. In any case, we suggest to clearly describe the role of the actors involved and the procedures of the process to ensure an efficient horizon scanning, monitoring, and assessment. We agree to start with 2 rounds of horizon scanning during 2 consecutive intersessional periods, where the expert group meets once per intersessional period. Concerning the concrete process, we concur with the suggestions made by the European Commission before. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Austria. Next on my list is Germany, followed by China and Argentina. Germany, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, as it is the first time for Germany to speak, we would like to thank the Secretariat for organizing this informal online conference and also the Chair for moderating this subject. Germany would like to thank the Secretariat for the development of document CBD/SBSTTA-24/4, which is a good starting point for discussions under Agenda Item 4. Germany supports its coordinated and non-duplicative approach on issues related to synthetic biology under the Convention and its protocols. We propose to recall paragraph 9 to 11 of Decision 14/19 and emphasize to imply a precautionary approach with respect to organisms containing engineered gene drives. Germany also supports the establishment of an efficient horizon scanning process of the most recent technological developments in synthetic biology. The horizon scanning process, however, needs to be clearly described and suitable to assess and identify the potential positive and potential negative impacts of synthetic biology vis-à-vis the three objectives of the Convention and those of its protocols. Therefore, we suggest some clarifications and more detailed descriptions to have a common basis for negotiations. The draft recommendation proposed to establish a multidisciplinary technical expert group for the horizon scanning process. Germany believes that multidisciplinary expertise is needed for the process and recommends to refer to the expert group as a multidisciplinary ad hoc technical expert group. This clarifies that the modus operandi is the same as those for ATEX and ensures a multidisciplinary approach. With a view to the process itself, we believe that 2 rounds of horizon scanning during 2 consecutive intersessional periods, where the expert group meets once per intersessional period, would be a good start. SBSTTA should review the horizon scanning process at its 28th meeting and provide a recommendation in this regard to COP17. We will hand in our suggested amendments to the recommendations in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Germany. Next on my list is China, followed by Argentina, and then Malawi. China, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Hello?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. 谢谢主席先生。
Thank you, Mr. Chair. China thanks the Secretariat and the ACTEC for the fruitful work on the synthetic biology related issues, and China welcomes the expert group's report, including the list of synthetic biology applications in the research and development stage. Necessary discussions and reviews on synthetic biology are of great importance for identifying its impact on the 3 objectives of the Convention and relative objectives of the Cartagena Protocol and Nagoya Protocol. China follows closely the development of the new and emerging biotechnologies, including synthetic biology, as well as the risk management, and is willing to continue to take an active part in the online meetings. And we agree with the multidisciplinary discussion and exchanges to proactively identify and manage potential risks posed by synthetic biology to biodiversity conservation, while caring about the impact of impact on human health. We invite the Secretariat to strengthen knowledge sharing and cooperation with relevant international organizations to help member states to enhance their capacity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, China. Next on my list is Argentina, followed by Malawi and Portugal. Argentina, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is being made in a preliminary, informal way. Argentina's position will be presented at the in-person meeting of SBSTTA-24. First of all, we wish to highlight the importance of a transparent, open and science-based discussion on synthetic biology. This is a concept where there's no definition that has been agreed by the parties yet. This subject touches on numerous aspects of the convention, such as the goal to have fair and equitable sharing of benefits derived from the utilization of genetic resources with the countries of origin. Secondly, a risk assessment of new biotech developments and technology transfer to developing countries so that they can conserve biodiversity and enjoy the benefits of modern biotechnology. Given this, we would like to make 3 comments on these documents that we're analysing. First of all, Argentina supports the 4-step process to carry out horizon scanning, monitoring and assessment. We consider that it's important for this process to be focused on reviewing technologies under development, but we suggest that this should be done by the parties in the SBSTTA meetings and not by a new technical expert group. It's not clear for us, in fact, the difference between this new group and a more traditional ATEG, apart from the fact that it is not time-bound, which seems strange for something like the CBD, which is an intergovernmental process. Secondly, Argentina needs more clarification about the request for the Secretariat to commission technology assessments. We have to consider that there's a large range between parties when it comes to carrying out risk assessments on modern biotechnology. In the case of Argentina, regulations are frequently updated on the basis of the latest scientific developments, where appropriate, to actually deal with these new innovative technologies. Therefore, the parties should identify the aim of the assessments mentioned in the recommendation, the procedural characteristics and its scope before this study is actually commissioned. Finally, we consider that it's important for the determination as to whether synthetic biology is or not a new emerging issue should be carried out in accordance with the analytical criteria established in Decision COP 929. We note with concern that the discussion on this matter has not been resolved in the ATEG report. It just reports on divergent views. Thus, we question the suitability of having an additional round of expert assessments. We suggest that the parties should concentrate on agreeing on this matter before we come up with future definitions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Argentina. Next on my list is Malawi, followed by Portugal and Chile. Malawi, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Malawi would like to support the statement made by Ethiopia on behalf of Africa, and it has taken note of the draft recommendation in the document CBD/SBSTTA-24/4. Chair, as highlighted in the document and in decision 14/9, Pala 2, synthetic biology is rapidly developing and a cross-cutting issue, with the potential benefit and potential adverse effect vis-à-vis on the 3 objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity. This therefore calls for the strengthened collaboration between the 2 protocols. That's the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety and the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing under the Convention. Chair, considering the rapid development of synthetic biology and the potential negative effect of on biodiversity and human well-being, Malawi supports Decision 13/7 on the need for experience sharing, capacity building in detection, identification and horizon scanning and monitoring of living modified organisms and products developed through synthetic biology, including the need for development of guidance with clear methodologies and risk assessment of RMOs resulting from synthetic biology. Lastly, Chair, Malawi also wishes to support the need to look beyond the operational definition of synthetic biology and calls for clarity on what products of synthetic biology need to be regulated and those that might need to be exempted, if any, under the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Malawi. Next on my list is Portugal, followed by Chile, and then Colombia. Portugal, please raise your hand. The floor is yours. Portugal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, in line with the other EU member states, Portugal supports a process for broad and regular horizon scanning, monitoring, and assessment of the most recent technological developments in synthetic biology, and considers that the provided working document is a good starting point for discussions under Agenda Item 4 at SBSTTA-24. Portugal proposed to recall paragraphs 9 to 11 of Decision 1419 and reinforce the precautionary approach with respect to engineered gene drives. With respect to evaluating synthetic biology against the criteria of new and emerging issues, Portugal does not see the necessity to do further work beyond the ad hoc technical expert group and SBSTTA-22, and is not in favor of reopening the discussion. We support an efficient horizon scanning process that should be able to identify the potential positive and negative impacts of synthetic biology and agree on the proposed steps of this process. We are flexible with respect to the implementation of these steps in the horizon scanning process, especially the assessment step, and believe that a multidisciplinary expertise is needed for this process, and a multidisciplinary ad hoc technical expert group can be an adequate option. Portugal is, however, ready to evaluate other options and can be flexible on the exact format and procedures for the assessment, as long as the collected information is duly assessed concerning the three objectives of the Convention. Therefore, Portugal is open to views and suggestions of other parties on how the necessary expertise can be guaranteed. Whatever the agreed upon option, Portugal suggests to clearly describe the role of the actors involved and the procedures of the process to ensure an efficient horizon scanning, monitoring, and assessment of the most recent technological developments in synthetic biology regarding the potential impacts, and always considering the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Cartagena Protocol, and the Nagoya Protocol. Portugal considers that a good way forward is to start with 2 rounds of horizon scanning during 2 consecutive intersessional periods where the expert group meets once per intersessional period. Portugal proposed that SBSTA reviews the process at its 28th meeting and provides a recommendation in this regard to COP70. Finally, Portugal also suggests an interim report on the effectiveness of the process to SBSTA on its 26th meeting by the Executive Secretary, and is open for the adoption of the process at COP16, if recommended by SBSTA. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Portugal. Next on my list is Chile, followed by Colombia and Italy. Chile, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, señor Co-Chair.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. On synthetic biology and the documents provided, Chile considers that we still need more clarity and understanding on this concept, its definition and its scope. We need to have a robust conceptual framework that allows us to differentiate this terminology and these techniques and products from other concepts that already exist. Therefore, we consider that at the moment, the information available is not sufficiently clear about the possible impacts of synthetic biology on biodiversity and ecosystems. Here are some of the aspects where we still have doubts. Sometimes synthetic biology is understood as a process and other times as a product. Secondly, we observe a lack of clarity as to how much of a genome of a specimen must be artificially created in order to be considered as synthetic biology. Also, it should be clarified whether a synthetic organism, in order to be considered as such, must be capable of reproduction or not. And are the gene editing techniques to be considered part of synthetic biology or not? These are some of our concerns. We support the need to continue with a multidisciplinary technical expert group on synthetic biology. However, we consider that it's fundamental for this group within its terms of reference to actually have the need to define a robust conceptual framework that can be adopted by the COP. Thus, we support the need to have a full horizon scanning, and this has to consider monitoring and assessment of the most recent technological advances, and it should stick as closely as possible to the conceptual synthetic biology framework that's been agreed upon. However, on the proposed decision, before we decide on a course of action vis-à-vis the technological advances that have been identified by the ATEG on synthetic biology, Chile thinks that we need to have sufficient clarity as to what constitutes a technological advance. Then we can decide whether to include them or not as input for the horizon scanning, the monitoring, and the assessment in the next biennium. Thus, we believe that it would be relevant to welcome the results of the ATEG on synthetic biology that was held in Montreal in June 2019. Instead of saying welcome, we should say appreciate. And Chair, these are general comments, and at the correct moment in time, we will hand in all the details, suggestions, and other proposals. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chile. So now, before Colombia is to take the floor, I will give the floor to Jordan. So the sequence will now be first Jordan, and then Colombia, and then Italy. Jordan, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
شكرا جزيلا سيدي الرئيس. إننا في المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية نراقب التطور في مفاهيم البيولوجيا التركيبية.
Thank you, Chair. Jordan is following closely synthetic biology developments. The advances are very rapid in this respect, and they affect the convention objectives and have both positive and negative impacts on biodiversity. We support the decisions of the convention, and this is a new issue that requires new research. Technologies vary from party to party. The expertise levels are very different. And so to put together a multidisciplinary technical expert group will require time. The group will need time to cover all of the aspects, all of the areas that are linked to the protocols and the conventions in this fashion, and the convention. In this fashion, COP we will be able to clarify issues for COP and to put in place the monitoring and control mechanism. It is also appropriate to bring this discussion back to COP16 in order to clarify our vision on this technology and to link it to the convention objectives. Thank you very much for your attention, and we will send in our text to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. Next on my list is Colombia, followed by Italy and Ecuador. Colombia, please raise your hand. The floor is yours. Colombia, please, the floor is yours. Colombia? I think Colombia is having some connection problems. Let's wait a few seconds, otherwise we'll give the floor to Italy, but just wait a few seconds. Colombia, can you hear me? Colombia, there you are. Floor is yours.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead, Colombia.
Thank you. Gracias, señor presidente. Para Colombia,
Thank you, Chair. For Colombia, the use and access to the benefits of synthetic biology is of national interest due to its potential to protect biodiversity, ensure conservation, sustainable use, and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits that may arise from it in accordance with the objectives of the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Cartagena Protocol and the Goya Protocol. Although we are not part of the Nagoya Protocol, we welcome the draft recommendations presented, and regarding the work of a special group of technological experts, it's relevant because it provides information that allow the parties to improve risk assessments with solid scientific foundations on a case-by-case basis and focused on the products of synthetic biology, not on the techniques used to produce them, taking into account that the effect on biodiversity is caused directly by the resulting product. However, we have certain considerations to make about the draft recommendation. In point 3 of the proposed decision, it's not clear, which it states that decides that trends in new technological advances in synthetic biology. We believe that we need to clarify and evaluate this in the coming years. In this sense, the scientific specificity must be taken into account the analysis of the products and the effect on biodiversity as contained in Annex 1. There's a great deal of information given, but not so much about the effects of the products in relation to biodiversity. So we wonder whether we should establish technological monitoring methodologies. Perhaps that could be considered as an option to be taken into account by parties to evaluate the impacts of the use of synthetic biology. In the same way, in paragraph 2 of the annex, we suggest we should include other applications of synthetic biology, and this should take into account the environment and the management and effective management of invasive alien species. Then in chapter 4 of the annex, we need to consider the work with different organizations that have information and technical knowledge about the positive and negative effects of synthetic biology, such as the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, amongst others. Finally, the group of experts must go beyond gathering information opinions. We suggest that we need more broader analyses based on scientific evidence and multidisciplinary work made up of representatives from all regions. Colombia recognizes that synthetic biology could bring benefits for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. However, we also have to make informed decisions that are based on the precautionary principle in order to avoid negative impacts on biodiversity. And finally, we need to evaluate matters related to synthetic biology as to whether they should be classified as an emerging issue, given the relevance, the level of progress and the potential it has for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and its ecosystem services. Thank you very much, Chair. The interpreter points out the sound was pretty bad, so I was sticking quite closely to the English translation. I did my best. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia, and thank you also to the translator. Next on my list is Italy, followed by Ecuador, and then Ethiopia. Italy, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
For giving the floor. Mr. Chair, Italy would like to thank the Secretariat for the efforts shown in organizing the meetings in preparation of the SBSTTA-24 and of the next conference of the parties, and in facilitating the coordination of the activities and interventions of the parties and stakeholders.
Italy, sorry, could you speak up a bit or move the microphone a bit closer because the volume is quite low? Thank you.
Okay, sorry, thank you. And stakeholders in such a complicated period. Italy considers the draft recommendation a good starting point for discussion and thanks the Secretariat for its preparation. Mr. Chair, Italy appreciates the work done by the ad hoc technical expert group on synthetic biology in analyzing and describing relevant trends of synthetic biology. and supports the HATEG conclusion contained in the report CBD/HATEG/2019/1/3 that states most living organisms already developed or currently under research and development through techniques of synthetic biology, including organisms containing engineered gene drives, fall under the definition of LMOs as the Cartagena Protocol. With reference to Article 1 of the suggested recommendation CBD/SBSTTA-24/4, Italy supports the proposal to establish a process for a broad and regular horizon scanning, and we are in line with the previous statements of European Union, Sweden, Finland, and Portugal. Italy is flexible about the implementation of the process, but taking into account that synthetic biology is a tricky topic as it covers a wide range of techniques, scientific disciplines, and field of applications, and evolves at a rapid pace, Italy considers useful a periodic evaluation on the effectiveness of the proposed process. Finally, Italy agrees to establish the multidisciplinary technical expert group on synthetic biology with the aim to support the process for a broad and regular horizon scanning. In this regard, Italy suggests that it should be clarified that the modus operandi and the selection of the experts of this group should mirror the one of the HATEG. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Italy. Next on my list is Ecuador, Ethiopia, and then we'll hear the last intervention from Cuba. So, Ecuador, please. Please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Gracias, señor co-presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Ecuador thanks the Secretariat for its work for supporting the actions that are necessary for drawing up this document. We'd also like to thank the work that's been done by the working group to analyse and prepare the technical discussion documents. We have considered that's very important that in order to continue with the excellent work undertaken by the Secretariat, we need to have a text which will allow SBSTTA to discuss and define that when it comes to synthetic biology, it needs to be dealt with within the framework of the CBD, and we need to draw on COP 9/29. And in order to be more specific with the categorization of this subject or not as a new and emerging issue, and also as regards the conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity. We do not yet have an agreed definition by the parties with clear limitations, but Ecuador can support the continuation of the work of the technical group and the horizon scannings and regular assessments on this subject of synthetic biology in order that this can feed into future decisions and have more elements for discussion on this process. Ecuador believes that this is a preliminary statement, and we will hand in our points when we continue with the formal SBSTTA sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ecuador. Next on my list is Ethiopia, followed by Cuba. Ethiopia, please, you have the floor. And please raise your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ethiopia supports the statement statement of Africa Group. Mr. Chair, synthetic biology has been a hot topic of discussion both at SBSTTA and at COP that took almost a decade to come up with internationally agreed rules of governance. As we all recall, COP12 decision on synthetic biology, that is decision 12/24, emphasized the need for precaution, regulatory systems, and socio-economic and risk assessment. Since COP12, Discussion on synthetic biology can be taken as an exceptionally prolonged version of discussion when we compare with other CBD issues. This would leave the issues of synthetic biology less assessed and less regulated than its predecessors. We strongly believe that unless parties to the CBD can agree on the operational definition, pre-question, DSI, socioeconomic impact and the risk assessment for synthetic biology, and commit to a forward-going plan of work addressing at least the most likely urgent implication, the global risks would remain as a hurtling of blind. This may lead into very uncertain and risky future if appropriate precautionary rules and regulations are not established. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ethiopia. Last on my list is Cuba. Cuba, you have the floor. Cuba? You have the floor. I think there might be a connection problem with Cuba. Yes, I'm notified that their connection is unstable. Let's just wait a couple of seconds. Cuba, can you hear me? Cuba? I don't think they seem to be able to connect now at the moment, so I would suggest we'll try to bring. There you go.
Buenos días, ¿me escuchan?
Can you hear me? Thank you, Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone participating in this meeting. For developing countries such as Cuba, adequate management of synthetic biology is extremely relevant. We are aware that, as the decision 14/29 has said, it's developing rapidly and we need to have a regular horizon scanning of these recently emerged technologies, which can bring benefits, but it can also have adverse effects on biodiversity. It's a cross-cutting issue in the convention and its protocol. We recognize that there could be potential benefits to this technology. We need to have access to these, and there needs to be fair and equitable sharing of benefits. So there needs to be reasonable safety and reasonableness. It's not a question of banning this, but we have to regulate and control it appropriately. And we need to carry out research and the use and stop possible accidental escapes and release. Because this could be the cause of great damage to biodiversity and human health. Because we want to have a One Health approach, we need to look at the risks with solid scientific evidence on a case-by-case basis. And we need to have adequate measures for risk management, and there needs to be free, prior informed consent from IPLCs who could be affected. And it's only by doing this that we will be able to actually stop potential adverse effects from occurring. Now, there's this question of whether synthetic biology is a new and emerging issue or not. The ATEG, in its last meeting, recognized the difficulty of trying to contextualize the criteria to carry out that type of assessment. Cuba believes that these criteria need to be improved. Thus, we consider that synthetic biology in general and these gene drives should be considered as new and emerging issues with accelerated development. which could exceed the regulatory approaches. So the scientific community and many actors have to be involved in this. In ATEG in 2019, it was said that SBSTA should make a recommendation to the COP as to whether synthetic biology should be considered as a new and emerging issue or not. We also agree that the dual character of the use of synthetic biology could cause problems related to biosafety, related to the 3 objectives of the CBD Convention. And there could be hostile use. We need to analyze these aspects within the Biosafety Convention. And we've had an online forum, and we've had 3 reports from the ATEG. We believe that this process for updating the technology assessment series should be pursued, and we need to continue to deepen our discussions on this matter and have more exchanges between parties and other entities, and we need to implement capacity building measures and technology transfer for developing countries such as Cuba, so that we can be in a better position when it comes to these new products and the research thereon. Thank you very much.
That was the end of my list from yesterday. If any other party would like to take the floor, please press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, which will turn yellow. Your request will be entered in the queue list. When I give you the floor, your microphone will be activated. The status bar will turn red on your computer, and you may start to speak immediately. So let's just wait a moment now. Yes, I see the Russian Federation wants to take the floor. So we'll hear the Russian Federation, followed by Switzerland, and then Morocco. Please, Russian Federation, you have the floor. Please raise your hand.
Yeah. Добрый день.
Hey. We support the proposals of Central and Eastern Europe and join in thanking the individuals and groups that have done such extensive and productive work to prepare these materials and proposals. We also agree with the general perception that rates and avenues of development of synthetic biology are hard to foresee, partly because of a certain level of information sensitivity around innovations. Russian legislation differentiates between the concept of products of synthetic biology and products of genetic engineering or living modified organisms. Synthetic biology involves designing and creating biological systems and entities with desired properties and functions which do not already exist in the natural world. The primary difference between synthetic biology and genetic engineering is that it does not imply nature-like technologies. Therefore, at the current stage of development of this industry, synthetic biology products should only be used in closed systems that meet all biosafety requirements in order to minimize the risks to the environment. An important area of interaction with the ad hoc technical expert group is the establishment of criteria for potential escape of synthetic biological agents from closed systems. With respect to risk assessment of synthetic biology, it would be premature to speak of establishing criteria in light of the current state of development of this new branch of basic science. When assessing the risks, the threat must be accurately determined and the result of interaction must be precisely defined, measurable, and detectable at the scale, time, and other important parameter values that apply when risk indicators are assessed. At the same time, synthetic biology may become more than just a threat to biodiversity. It can also bring with it significant economic and even geopolitical advantages. However, for this to happen, the appropriate legal, administrative, and scientific frameworks must be put in place. The elevated invasive potential of biological agents and LMOs resulting from the application of products and methods of synthetic biology is an obvious source of potential risks at the individual, local, regional, and ecosystem level. It is crucial to improve upon the technologies and methods of instrumental investigation, biomedical safety assessment, disease control and prevention, and environmental safety studies. For countries where synthetic biology products and technologies are used, a maximum level of physical containment and security must be implemented for such technological entities and information. It is essential to introduce and maintain an integrated registry of research conducted in this field, transformative events and products, entities and materials obtained through synthetic biology. In those countries where proliferation and replication of technologies for producing synthetic biological agents and/or their industrial use is anticipated, it is incumbent upon state regulatory authorities to issue permits for such activities only when biomedical assessments, disease control and prevention measures, and environmental safety studies have been rigorously, fully, and correctly implemented. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Russian Federation. Next on my list is Switzerland, followed by Morocco and Belgium. Switzerland, please raise your hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, esteemed delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Switzerland would like to thank the ATEC and the SBSTA Secretariat for their excellent work. On our viewpoint, the provided documents are a good starting point. Last but not least, we would like to thank the Secretariat for making this meeting possible in the current situation. About our statement, Switzerland recognizes that synthetic biology is a rapid evolving and cross-cutting issue that concerns the three objectives of the Convention. On that basis, Switzerland pleads for the application of the precautionary approach at any stages from research, development, and release of organisms, of products, and of components engineered through synthetic biology in accordance with the objective of the Convention. In particular, for the development and release of organisms which contained engineered gene drive, Switzerland is of the opinion that it is necessary to rigorously implement the precautionary approach to avoid potentially significant and irreversible effects to the biodiversity and, when necessary, on a case-by-case basis, to refrain releasing those into the environment as long as risks and benefits cannot be correctly assessed. The organisms engineered through synthetic biology and or those that contain engineered gene drive who are considered as living modified organisms shall fall under the Cartagena Protocol. Furthermore, Switzerland is of the opinion that for those, as long as risk and benefit cannot be correctly assessed and as long as risk management measures cannot be correctly set into force, it is necessary to refrain releasing those to avoid also reversible effects into the biodiversity and unintended transboundary movement. By its nature, its speed of development, and in view of potential benefits and potential adverse effects of organisms, components, and products of synthetic biology on biodiversity, synthetic biology is a topic to be monitored over long term. Therefore, Switzerland supports the establishment of a horizon scanning process as well as a multidisciplinary technical expert group on synthetic biology and all the proposed activity and processes in order to follow this issue over the long term. Switzerland has sent its comments in written, and I would like to thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Switzerland. The order of interventions is as follows. First Morocco, followed by Belgium, and then Japan. I now give the floor to Morocco. Morocco, please raise your hand.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and welcome everyone. Morocco welcomes document SBSTTA-24/4/Rev1 on synthetic biology, as well as the information papers. We also take note of the report of the technical expert group on this issue from its June 2019 meeting. Morocco supports Ethiopia's intervention made yesterday on behalf of Africa and underscores the ATEC's acknowledgement of the importance of taking into account the pace of development, geographic distribution, as well as the availability and accessibility of tools and expertise required to take stock of new technology developments in synthetic biology. We also underscore the inherent linkages that exist between the issue of digital sequencing information on genetic resources and synthetic biology. The latter develops tools that could bring on a shift in the understanding of what a genetic resource is, with, as a consequence, the risk of illegal appropriation of the original source of DNA information. Morocco reiterates our support for the recommendation to use a precautionary approach in creating and disseminating organisms with engineered gene drives, including experimental dissemination. The purpose being to avoid potential significant, harmful, and irreversible effects on biodiversity. We recommend deeper coordination, as has been said by several parties, in the future between the ATEG on synthetic biology and that dealing with risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms. Finally, as concluded by the ATEG, Morocco considers it necessary to continue filling in the knowledge gaps on synthetic biology and on the positive and negative impacts on the three objectives of the Convention of any organism containing or product resulting from this new dimension of modern biotechnology. This could be done within the framework of the Multidisciplinary Technical Expert Group on Synthetic Biology, which will be supporting the horizon scanning process. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Morocco.
Thank you, Morocco.
We have Belgium on my list, followed by Japan and then Paraguay. Belgium, you have the floor. Please raise your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, Belgium thanks the Secretariat for preparing the documents we are now considering. Regarding horizon scanning, monitoring and assessment of new developments in synthetic biology, Belgium looks forward to an effective and efficient horizon scanning, monitoring and assessment system, but remains to be convinced that the Multidisciplinary Technical Expert Group, as recommended by the ATEC, is the only possible option. We would need clarification on its mandate, structure and composition, as establishing it as proposed would set a precedent in the Convention. Belgium prefers a well-circumscribed, light-touched and adaptable system and is ready to constructively consider alternatives. Nevertheless, we do see value in continuing the work of the open-ended online forum on synthetic biology. In line with this, and with our long-standing position that Belgium promotes synergies among biodiversity-related processes, Belgium agrees with others that a coordinated, complementary and non-duplicative approach is needed on issues related to synthetic biology under the Convention and its protocols, as well as among other conventions and relevant organizations and initiatives. We further emphasize the importance of applying a precautionary approach in accordance with the objectives of the Convention when considering applications of synthetic biology. Please note that the views expressed here are provisional and Belgium reserves the right to adapt them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Belgium. Next on my list is Japan, and Paraguay is the last on my list. Japan, the floor is yours. Please raise your hand.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, thank you. We would like to express Japan's views on the suggested recommendation on item 4, synthetic biology. Our consistent position on the treatment of synthetic biology is that it is not appropriate to begin any specific considerations before concluding whether or not synthetic biology should be a new and emerging issue. Japan appreciates the dedicated work done by the ARTIC members. However, we would like to draw your attention to the fact that their report did not conclude if synthetic biology fully satisfies the criteria set out in Decision 9/29. Therefore, we would like to request the deletion of paragraphs 1 through 6 of the draft recommendation, which recommends specific consideration of the treatment of synthetic biology. If paragraphs 1 through 6 of the draft recommendation are upheld, we are prepared to propose adding a new paragraphs to the draft recommendation. We would also like to propose changing the 4 years in paragraph 4 of Annex 2 to 2 years. Furthermore, in the trend in paragraph 5, parenthesis A of Annex 1, we propose to delete the phrase organizations, components, and products derived from, because these definitions are not strictly defined. If at subsidiary bodies' 24th meetings, discussions would proceed on whether or not synthetic biology should be treated as a new and emerging issue, we would like to argue that synthetic biology should not be treated as a new and emerging issue in accordance with our comments previously submitted to the Convention Secretariat. Furthermore, we support the argument that the Conference of the Parties should invite the submission of views on the improvement of the criteria set out in Decision 9/29 and their application, in order to proceed with consideration of improvements for new and emerging issues. However, we believe that the discussion should proceed with an inquiry that has advanced based on the results of the notification number 2017-054 issued by the Convention Secretariat in June 2017. We submit our comments on this agenda. That's all for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Japan. We will now move to Paraguay, which will conclude the list of party interventions. Paraguay, you have the floor. Please raise your hand.
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank the Chair and the Secretariat for organising this meeting. And we agree with what has been said by Brazil and Argentina that was spoken before us. Paraguay agrees with the proposed process as long as we concentrate on technologies under development, but we don't think we have to set up another expert group to deal with this. We believe that it is not clear how this new ATEG group would be different from the traditional ATEG group, apart from the fact that it wouldn't be time limited, and that would be a problem more than an advantage. On the other hand, SBSTA is a scientific body in and of itself that advises the CBD. So we recommend that the process should concentrate on the following items: collecting information and organising and synthesising the information to be carried out by the Secretariat. And that the SBSTA should be the body that carries out the assessment in accordance with the process established for new and emerging issues. In this way, it is not necessary to dedicate new and additional resources to set up the multidisciplinary expert group or to continue to expand the synthetic biology programme within the framework of the CBD. We wish to highlight that for the moment, the parties to the convention have not agreed on a definition for synthetic biology, and the parties have shown their concern in continuing to dedicate resources to this discussion, which has been rather speculative up until now, especially as there are frameworks and various types of scope that exist for dealing with GMOs already. The draft requires that the Executive Secretary should commission an technology assessment as identified in the report. However, it's not clear what the objective of this assessment would be, nor what would the process be to generate this. So we have to clarify this process. The scope and the limits have to be agreed by the party before this element is included in the overall process. Deciding whether synthetic biology is a new and emerging issue or not related to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity is a matter that requires analysis within the context of the criteria established in COP Decision 9/19. SBSTA has not been able to complete its analysis, even although we've been collecting information since 2011. And in spite of the lack of agreement between the parties on this point, the programme in synthetic biology has continued and has indeed been expanded since 2011. In this context, SBSTA's draft is a new expansion with the setting up of a new group of experts that would work for an indefinite amount of time, and their terms of reference are not very clear. We believe that this expansion is not justified, given the lack of results from the programme on synthetic biology over the last decade.
To conclude.
Sí. El ATEC de 2019 fue el primero.
So ATEC 2019 was the first group to think about criteria for identifying a new and emerging issue, and its report reflects that there were divergent views on the criteria. Thus, ATEC was not able to draw a conclusion on this subject. We think that we should not continue nor extend the work on synthetic biology until we have defined whether or not it's a new and emerging issue. Thus, we recommend that the work should be limited to collecting, organising and synthesising the information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paraguay. So I see no more requests from parties for the floor on the dashboard of my electric vehicle here. So we will now move to interventions from first the non-parties, followed by organizations, and then we'll start with major groups. Are there any requests from non-parties for the floor? I see no requests, so then we'll move to major groups. So I now open the floor for interventions by representatives of the major stakeholder groups. So each statement should not exceed 5 minutes. Representative of indigenous peoples and local communities, please raise your hand. Ms. Viviana Figueroa, de Mujeres Indígenas sobre Biodiversidad de América Latina y Caribe, you have the floor. Please raise your hand.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are making this statement on behalf of the IIFB and also the Indigenous Women's Network on Biodiversity. And we work with the Outreach Network for Gene Drive Research, and we've organised a series of web seminars on Indigenous peoples and gene drives in order to better understand this subject. We would like to make the following recommendations. We consider that given the big impact that synthetic biology can have on biodiversity and also on traditional knowledge, that this subject should be considered in the overall biodiversity framework, because it can put biodiversity at risk. And we would also like to point out that Indigenous peoples have the right to have access to information and a document on synthetic biology projects which could have an impact impact on our lands and waters before they're implemented with a culturally appropriate consultation, and we need to have free and prior and informed consent. We would like to ask the parties that when considering requests to authorise research on synthetic biology, they should apply the precautionary principle as well as the voluntary guidelines from ACICON to protect traditional knowledge and ensure that there's always free, prior and informed consent, as we have laid out in the voluntary Moas-Kukstal guidelines. And turning now to the document, there are some inclusions that we'd like to make. For example, when establishing the multidisciplinary technical expert group on synthetic biology, we have to include full and effective participation of Indigenous peoples from the 7 geographical regions recognised by the CBD. And we also ask, a new paragraph, request the Executive Secretary to support the financing mechanism and other bilateral and multilateral cooperation contributions to organisation so that we can better understand this subject. And when it comes to the multidisciplinary group, we have to continue to say that we will examine and assess the possible cultural, socio-economic and environmental effects of the application of the new synthetic biology technologies on Indigenous peoples in order to mitigate potential impacts and also to guarantee the implementation of Goal 15 of the SDGs. And we have to also take account of the work that is being carried out by ATEG on traditional knowledge in 2017 and in 2019, as well as the work carried out in the expert group under Article 26 of the Cartagena Protocol. We would also like to underline once again that it's very important to include that in this multidisciplinary technical expert group, there should be at least 7 representatives from the Indigenous peoples from the socio-cultural regions set up in accordance with the permanent form on Indigenous issues. So by way of conclusion, we would like to say that the Indigenous peoples have contributed and wish to collaborate when it comes to carrying out research that are based on the self-determination of our peoples and also free, prior and informed consent and the right to full and effective participation, including the participation of Indigenous women and youth at all levels. The research has to be carried out in accordance with the objectives of the Convention to protect our biodiversity, our ways of living and our traditional knowledge and innovations and practices. And we will hand over to the Secretariat our specific text that we are suggesting for the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, IPLCs, and thank you also for keeping well within the time limits. I would like to hand the floor to our representative on behalf of women's organization, Ms. Amelia Areguin, Fundación Ambiente y Recursos Naturales, FARN. Please raise your hand. You have the floor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm reading this statement on behalf of the CBD Women Caucus. Synthetic biology is a new and emerging issue for the CBD that is developing at a rapid and unprecedented rate, while knowledge of impact is still limited. This calls for very strong precautionary regulations and safeguards. As a first act of extreme precaution requested of the situation, we recommend an immediate global moratorium on any release of gene-derived organisms into the environment. We urge the paramount importance of free, prior, and informed consent of all potentially affected IPLC, particularly women and girls. The development of organisms containing engineered gene drives is progressing fast, and release plans are proposed before urgently needed and internationally agreed regulations and safeguards are in place. In addition to concerns about the impacts of gene drives, we reiterate FPIC as a right of IPs and call on parties to ensure its obtention before any plan to release of synthetic biology organisms, components, or products that may impact traditional knowledge, practices, livelihoods, and use of land resources and water by women and girls. We strongly support the establishment of a multidisciplinary technical expert group to ensure that such discussions include the needed early analysis. The MTEC should include representatives of women and Indigenous peoples and local communities and youth. It should also include the requirement for participatory technology assessments. This is to ensure that communities and people, particularly women and girls, who are most at risk to be impacted and bear high costs for any negative impact, be part of the process of assessments about health, socioeconomic, and cultural impacts. The most recent attack on synthetic biology flagged concerns about new transient modification biotechnologies, such as gene silencing RNA sprays, and how they should be governed given their novel risks. We urge parties to request work exploring both the risks and governance of transient modification and other emerging biotechnologies. Before any organisms, components, and products of synthetic biology are approved or released into the environment or market, developers should be required to develop additional detection, identification, and monitoring tools. Currently, these tools are inadequate and insufficient. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Women will now have a break, so I give the floor to the Secretariat to announce the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a usual break for 15 minutes, so we will reconvene at 8:45 Montreal time. And please don't log off. So after the break, we will continue with major groups followed by observers. Thank you.
YBN, please raise your hand. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, I think.
On behalf of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network.
Excuse me, I think you might have to turn your camera off because your connection is a bit bad. Thank you.
Is it okay now?
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Global Biodiversity Network. Current generation share responsibility in ensuring a safe, fair, and sustainable planet for the generations that follow. This principle of intergenerational equity entails that we always think long term, and this must be a key guiding principle in the work of the Convention. In this spirit, we stress the necessity of always strictly applying the precautionary principle to guide all the decisions on synthetic biology, including the laws regarding gene drives and living modified species. We also emphasize that the free, prior, and informed consent and approval and involvement of potentially affected indigenous people and local communities should always be obtained and cannot be avoided under any type of national circumstances or legislation. The uncertainties behind these forms of technology and the
Mr. Chair, this is the English booth. Due to the quality of the sound, we are interrupting interpretation.
To keep the needed conservation, information, and involvement of potentially affected communities. The extremely fast technological development in the field of synthetic biology, especially fueled by corporate interests, brings a great sense of urgency in developing strict and effective regulations and guidelines to provide parties with tools to tackle these new technologies. Further, there is a great urgency to build the capacity of developing countries to implement the said guidelines. In this regard, we welcome the work of the ATEC and the consideration of the open-ended online forum on risk assessment and risk management in the discussions, which should be strengthened by bringing a more diverse group of voices and opinions, especially from the right holders that could be most affected. Finally, we would like to make the following text recommendation on the draft decision, and we will submit this in writing. In paragraph 2, establishes the multidisciplinary technical expert group on synthetic biology, and here adds with the full and effective participation of relevant rights holders, including indigenous people, women, and youth, and the rest of the paragraph remains. In paragraph 7, also request the Executive Secretary to continue pursuing corporate cooperation with other organizations, conventions, and initiatives, including academic and research institutions, and indigenous people and local communities, women, and youth, on issues related to synthetic biology. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Youth. So there was the connection was quite bad when you held your intervention. So I and it couldn't be interpreted properly. So I refer for all of us to read the written intervention. So please submit the written intervention, and we encourage everyone to go to the written intervention to hear the and to read your statement. Thank you. I now give the floor to a representative of non-governmental organizations, CBD Alliance. Please raise your hand. You have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the CBD Alliance. Since this convention made its first decision on synthetic biology at SBSTTA 14, synthetic biology has expanded in scope, scale, depth of intervention and disruption at a dizzying speed. The parties to the CBD were wise to start engaging early in governing synthetic biology in accordance with the precautionary principle. Now is the wrong time to advocate oversight and derail a decade of careful work. You are being asked again whether synthetic biology is a new and emerging issue for the CBD. It clearly is. There has been 11 years and thousands of hours and work on this matter. Parties should stop playing procedural games and let this important work be honored and continue. 2, you are also being asked to establish a multidisciplinary technical expert group to provide early and up-to-date analysis to SBSTTA, supported by a range of expertise, including that of indigenous people and local communities. Participatory technology assessment methodologies are key for this expert group to adequately assess health, socioeconomic, cultural, and ethical impacts. That regular monitoring, horizon scanning, and evaluation process must be brought back to the SBSTTA COP for consideration in each biennium, including for consideration at COP16. Civil society strongly supports the establishment of this expert group on a fully multidisciplinary basis. 3rd, parties are asked to consider the development and application of new biotechnologies where engineered nucleic acids are used in the open environment, such as RNA sprays. The most recent ATEC flag concerns that these new transient modification biotechnologies may fall outside of the Cartagena Protocol, but they still present risk to biodiversity. We urge, therefore, parties to request work by the CBD to explore both the risk and governance of these new transient expression technologies. 4th, we are very concerned that research and development of organisms containing engineered gene drive is progressing with clear plans for release. We reiterate the need to apply extreme precaution on gene drive organisms and to re-emphasize the importance of free prior informed consent of potentially affected peoples. We call for an immediate global moratorium on the release of gene drive organisms into the environment, including experimental release. International contained use regulations for gene drive organisms don't exist neither, and they are urgently needed. 5, FPIC must be obtained before releasing any synthetic biology organism, components, or products, and that may impact traditional knowledge, innovation, practices, livelihoods, and use of natural resources. Finally, further work is needed on detection, identification, and monitoring of organisms, components, and products of synthetic biology, as current detection tools are vastly insufficient. Additional tools for this purpose should be required, and particularly of developers, before any approval or release into the environment or market is granted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, NGO etc. Group. Next on my list is Third World Network, TWN. Please raise your hand. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
We are in unprecedented times, and the urgency to protect biodiversity and share the benefits equitably has never been greater. While we appreciate the opportunity to exchange views in this informal meeting, we do not believe that it will be equitable to hold formal virtual negotiations due to the digital divide, disadvantaging developing countries with limited capacity and without good internet and technical capability. What is urgently needed instead is for renewed commitment by parties to implement their obligations under the CBD. In this regard, the discussions on synthetic biology are clearly urgent and should not be postponed by circular arguments of whether it is a new and emerging issue. It clearly is. Synthetic biology technologies are intensifying in scale and depth, resulting in increased risks to biodiversity and human health. For example, applications that aim to perform population-wide engineering and technologies to directly engineer organisms in the environment are in development. As agreed by COP14, we urgently need a process for broad and regular horizon scanning, monitoring, and assessment of the most recent technological developments, including of concrete applications of genome editing if they relate to synthetic biology. The multidisciplinary technical expert group has to fully incorporate the multidisciplinary expertise needed to cover the increasing diversity of applications expanding beyond agriculture into human health, conservation, as well as gain-of-function experiments and reconstruction of pathogenic viruses. Such trends also emphasize the urgent need to conduct technology assessments to adequately assess the human, animal, and plant health, socioeconomic, cultural, and ethical impacts. There must be effective participation of IPLCs in the multidisciplinary technical expert group. The free, prior, and informed consent of IPLCs must be obtained before releasing any synthetic biology organisms, components, or products that may impact their traditional knowledge, innovation, practices, livelihoods, the use of land resources, and water. We're extremely concerned by near-future plans for release of organisms containing engineered gene drives. Such organisms, designed to spread indefinitely, have the potential to result in an irreversible impact on biodiversity. There's a need to apply the precautionary principle. We call for an immediate global moratorium on the release, including experimental release into the environment of such organisms. At the same time, research and development continues in the laboratory. Accidental escape could result in indefinite transmission of some of these technologies. There has to be stringent contained use regulations at national levels, and in particular, we need international contained use regulations for organisms containing engineered gene drives, as these do not yet exist. Finally, further work on detection, identification, and monitoring of organisms, components, and products of synthetic biology is necessary, in particular to identify organisms for which current tools are insufficient and to develop additional tools. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now invite observers to take the floor. Please raise your hand to be registered in the queue. And while we wait for that, we'll hear the next interventions from IPC. IPC, please, you have the floor. IPC, please raise your hand. The floor is yours. And I'm sorry because I forgot to open the floor for interventions for observers. So that's what I have been doing and what I'm doing now. So just please raise your hands if you are an observer and would like to speak, and you will be registered. While we wait for that, we'll hear the intervention from IPC. IPC, please, you have the floor.
Gracias. Soy Marciano Silva del Movimento de los Pequenos Agricultores de Brasil.
Thank you. I am from the Brazilian Farmers Association. I want to talk about food sovereignty, and we represent over 6,000 grassroots organisations and social movements of indigenous peoples and small-scale food producers. It's been almost a decade since the CBD began tracking developments in synthetic biology. I'm afraid the sound is breaking up, points out the interpreter. However, today the significant development of AI and automation have serious implications for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Therefore, there's an urgent need for governments to intervene on the potential disruptive effect it may have on millions of peasants, farmers and harvesters, as well as on the biodiversity they manage. 3 issues must be taken into account by governments. Firstly, the potential socio-economic damage because of the substitution of natural products by products generated from synthetic biology. This should be a priority of the CBD and the parties, as they should guarantee the rights of farmers to protect the biodiversity they manage. Also, we have to guarantee safety, traceability, requisition ability and liability must be ensured in order to protect the small-scale food producers and the custodians of agricultural biodiversity from the contamination of biosynthesized ingredients. The synthetic biology products must not be presented as natural products, explicitly rejecting the natural labelling of synthetic biology products. This would keep the consumers informed and will leave freedom to the small-scale food producers to sell their products. The governments should take responsibility within the framework of the CBD and clear up any discussion about the false claim of natural in synthetic biology products. This should be the approach that this forum should have in tackling synthetic biology. We are here to safeguard the conservation of nature and its biodiversity, the one on which small-scale food producers count for their subsistence and to feed people. We are not here to create a new nature. We hope that the results of the ATEG will be welcomed by this forum, and we claim that starting from the following ATEG, small-scale food producers should be included in the discussions, namely those who manage the largest part of agricultural biodiversity together with indigenous peoples. They need to be included also in the horizon scanning procedures. They could include this group when assessing the technology and introductions into the fields. Thank you very much, Chair.
You see, next on my list is FOE US. FOE US, please raise your hand. You have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. On behalf of Friends of the Earth United States, I'd like to express our serious concerns about the unassessed and unregulated risks of synthetic biology and outline several steps that should be reflected in the SBSTA text and recommendations for the upcoming COP. To act in accord with the Convention and the precautionary principle, we need stronger regulatory oversight and risk assessments specific to synthetic biology, which include environmental, socioeconomic, and gender impacts. We are clear that synthetic biology is a new and emerging issue and has been for years, and we should not waste time debating this question any longer. The CBD must focus its efforts to establish guidelines for precautionary regulations. In my comments, I will speak to the continued need for a moratorium on the gene drive releases and any topic that should be considered, and a new topic that should be considered a new and emerging issue, transient modification. On gene drives, the CBD must continue to focus on gene drives and the environmental, health, and socioeconomic risks which cause irreversible ecological damage across generations of species. While there is also a risk assessment component, gene drives must also be within the CBD. There must be a moratorium on the environmental and commercial development or release of gene drives, and the UN must reiterate the commitment to the free, prior informed consent of all potentially affected people before any research or development in this field is undertaken. On transient modification, the most recent ATEG on synthetic biology raised concerns about transient modification biotechnologies. We urge parties to SBSTA and CBD to take it up as a new and emerging issue. One example of this technology includes RNAi spray, a gene silencing pesticide designed to kill organisms by switching off or silencing genes essential for survival. This is significantly different from genetically engineering crops, as these gene silencing pesticides constitute a vast open air experiment. Any organisms that come into contact may be genetically modified, and these modifications may be passed on to multiple generations. Gene silencing RNAi spray and other transient modifications technologies could modify our organisms despite the product itself not being a living GMO. Further discussions under the CBD will need to resolve how transient modification and synthetic biology technologies can be assessed, safeguarded, and regulated to encompass the entirety of intended and unintended effects. Parties should request the CBD work to address the vast and novel environmental, health, and socioeconomic concerns and complicated governance implications. Friends of the Earth also supports the multidisciplinary technical expert group, which includes expertise from women, indigenous peoples, and local communities. We strongly recommend participatory technology assessments to ensure that SBSTA is looking ahead at technologies which require early analysis and assessments about health, socioeconomic, and cultural impacts. Friends of the Earth urges the adoption of the recommendations to be passed along to the next COP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Friends of the Earth. And the last intervention, which will conclude this item, is from NGO GCVI. GCVI, please raise your hand. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The J. Craig Venter Institute is a nonprofit basic biology research institute, a basic biology research institute in the United States. JCVI scientists have been leaders in the fields of genomics and synthetic biology for close to 2 decades. Brazil and other parties have pointed out that synthetic biology can provide many tools to address the drivers of biodiversity loss. As many of you may know, synthetic biology has enabled the development of fundamentally new types of vaccines at unprecedented speed to combat the COVID pandemic. The potential that synthetic biology holds to advance the objectives of the convention has been well explained in a recent IUCN report referenced in paragraph 29 of CBD Substa 24/4. Thus, my organization is supportive of the recommendation in paragraph 39 for horizon scanning and technology assessment of new developments in synthetic biology. Many groups are already doing this, and we hope that the CBD makes use of this existing expertise. Technology assessment methods have been used for the past several decades by the 20 or so offices of technology assessment advising national parliaments around the globe, as well as many other organizations. There is no need to reinvent this wheel. Technology assessments examine both the benefits and risks of new technologies. They can help policymakers understand how technologies, such as synthetic biology, can be used in productive ways. For example, to make progress on all 3 objectives of the CBD. JCVI and other organizations engaged in synthetic biology research would be pleased to participate in the horizon scanning and technology assessment process if adopted by the COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, GCI. So I see no more requests for the floor. As previously explained, there will be no conference room papers stemming from this informal session. So the Secretariat will prepare a short procedural report on the session, noting the parties and observers that had made interventions. Now we will go to item 5 on the provisional agenda of Substa 24, risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms. So I now give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce the documents for the item. Please, Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On item overview of the activities carried out during the intersessional period and a draft recommendation for consideration by Substa. This document is complemented by 7 information documents. Information Document 1, a synthesis of submissions on experiences, challenges, and needs regarding risk assessment of living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives and living modified fish. Information Document 2, a synthesis of interventions from the open-ended online forum. Information Documents 3 and 4 provide studies on risk assessment application of Annex 1 to living modified fish and in living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives. Information document 5 is a report of the ad hoc technical experts meeting on risk assessment. Information group 7 provides a list of bibliographic references on engineered gene drives and living modified fish. And finally, information document 13 is a synthesis of relevant information from the 4th National Report on the implementation of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. The subsidiary body will be invited to consider these documents and provide a recommendation, among other things, on whether additional guidance materials on risk assessment are needed for living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives and living modified consideration by the Conference of the Parties, serving as a meeting of the parties to the Cartagena Protocol at its 10th meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Mechanisms. As this agenda item is related to the Cartagena Protocol, I will start with regional groups, followed by parties to the Cartagena Protocol, followed by other parties, and then observers. I will take the first intervention from the African region. African region, Ethiopia, you have the floor. Please press the raise your hand button to be given the floor. Thank you.
Do you hear me, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ethiopia is pleased to deliver the statement on behalf of Africa Group. Africa would like to commend the work done thus far through various processes during the current intersessional period, including the study on living modified fish and living modified organism containing engineered gene drive, and the analysis done on the 2 topics by the ad hoc technical expert group on risk assessment. Africa notices ATEC's recognition that resources related to risk assessment of living modified fish do exist, including documents prepared by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the European Food Safety Authority, and the other developed specifically in context of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. In addition, various resources on risk assessment of living modified animals in general are available. Africa agrees with the view that existing resources sufficiently address risk assessment needs and accordingly supports the decision that the development of guidance on risk assessment of living modified fish should not be prioritized at this stage. Africa notes ATEC's conclusions that resources related to risk assessment of living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives do exist, and that these could be useful resources when undertaking risk assessments, but that these are not always globally applicable. Africa is therefore of the view that existing risk assessment resources should be revised or adapted to align with the locally relevant objective of the Cartagena Protocol. Africa supports scientifically sound case-by-case risk assessment and a decision-making processes that weighs risk against benefits, including the perspectives of indigenous people and the local community as may be appropriate. Africa is concerned about the proposed establishment of an ATEC on risk assessment. Africa is of the view that the establishment of an ATEC must always be based on a clear and significant mandate, which cannot be accomplished through existing structures and processes. Lastly, Africa is also concerned about the low visibility of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety during this intersessional period and could like to remind parties of decision COP 9. Herein, the parties stressed the importance of including biosafety in the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, as well as the necessity of developing a specific implementation plan for the Cartagena Protocol as a follow-up to the 2011-2020 strategic plan for the protocol. Africa therefore requests the same level of attention for the plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ethiopia, on behalf of the African region. Central and Eastern Europe region, Belarus, you now have the floor. Please press the raise hand button to be given the floor. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dear Chair, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to address a statement on behalf of the Central and Eastern European region. The CA region would like to thank Secretariat for preparing document CBD/SABSTA/24/5. We would like to express our deep appreciation to the Secretariat of the Convention for organizing, ensuring and supporting the effective work of the open-ended online forum on risk assessment and the ad hoc technical expert group on risk assessment in the new circumstances. The CA region welcomes the suggested recommendation of the document on risk assessment and risk management and support them to be adopted by SABSTA and submitted to the Conference of the Parties at its 15th meeting. The region considers further development of additional guidance materials on risk assessment for living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives as important. The CA region supports the outcomes of the discussions of the ad hoc technical expert group on risk assessment and endorses its recommendations that guidance for the risk assessment on living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives should be developed. And it considers important to establish the ACTA group on risk assessment on LMOs to develop additional guidance materials. It should be noted that such organisms have the potential to result in an irreversible impact on biodiversity, and that this is amplified by the inability to control a gene drive after release and the lack of management plans to reverse or recall them. To be mentioned, there are numerous challenges to risk assessment due to inter alia, the increased uncertainties regarding next generation effects in wild populations, evolutionary consequences, and the potential for unintended effects to occur over time in genetically diverse wild populations. We think that the development of the guidance on risk assessment on LMOs containing engineered gene drives should build on and complement already existing CBD decision on gene drives, including applying a precautionary approach. The terms of reference for the ACTEC development guidance on risk assessment for LMOs containing engineered gene drive should therefore reflect this. This would contribute to a coordinated approach under the CBD and Cartagena Protocol on synthetic biology. We also would like to stress the importance of continued work to identify additional issues on which guidance materials on risk assessment may be needed, taking into account prioritized priorities identified by parties, including through their national reports. We would also like to emphasize the need to continue cooperation with other organizations, conventions, and initiatives, including academic and research institutions, on issues related to assessment and risk management of LMOs. The CA region also reiterates a critical need for capacity building in the field of risk assessment and risk management of LMOs in accordance with the guidelines developed under the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Belarus. I will now open the floor for interventions by parties to the Cartagena Protocol first. If you wish to speak, please press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, which will turn yellow. Your request will be entered in the queue list. When I give you the floor, your microphone will be activated. The status bar will turn red on your computer and you may start to speak immediately. So please press the raise hand button if you are a party to the Cartagena Protocol and you would like to speak. I see New Zealand. New Zealand is on my list, followed by Brazil, and then Thailand. New Zealand, you have the floor. Please press the raise hand button.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. New Zealand commends the substantial effort undertaken by the Risk Assessment Outtake, notes its report, and endorses its conclusion that the development of further guidance for living modified fish is not required at this time. Further, New Zealand supports the Outtake's conclusion that the development of guidance regarding living modified gene-drive organisms is warranted with certain reservations. Recalling that both decisions 14/19 on synthetic biology and CP 9/13 on risk assessment of LMOs contain the statement, quote, as there could be potential adverse effects arising from organisms containing engineered gene drives, before these organisms are considered for release into the environment, research and analysis are needed, and specific guidance may be useful to support case-by-case risk assessment, end quote. We are particularly concerned that the draft decision in terms of reference for the Outtake as written do not account for the development of, quote, specific guidance, end quote, to support, quote, case-by-case risk assessments of living modified gene-drive organisms. It is New Zealand's view that the purpose of the new Outtake, described in paragraph 6, must be clarified to align it with the original intention of decisions 14/19 and CP 9/13 in this draft decision and its supporting annex. To this end, we propose textual changes to paragraphs 6 and 9 of the draft decision, as well as paragraph 1C of the annex in the decision, which we will submit in writing to the Secretariat to account clearly for the intent of decisions 14/19 and CP 9/13 for guidance that supports case-by-case risk assessment. In addition to these changes, New Zealand suggests 2 minor changes to the text to correct a grammatical error and possibly erroneous internal reference. Specifically, in paragraph 1, the phrase recalling of should simply be recalling. In paragraph 8C, we note a reference to paragraph 5, which we believe should be a reference to paragraph 7. Finally, we note that the draft decision does not provide a mechanism by which parties may submit information regarding their needs on issues of risk assessment. We propose changes to the text of paragraph 10 to enable the submission of identified needs to the Secretariat. We will submit this suggested change to in the text to the Secretariat in writing as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, New Zealand. Just a slight change in order. We will now hear Portugal, followed by France, and then Norway. Portugal, you have the floor. Please press the raise hand button.
Hello?
I hear. Please go ahead.
For the preparation of all the background documents and reports. Likewise, we wish to recognize and thank all the members of the ad hoc technical expert group, an open-ended online forum on risk assessment and risk management, for their expertise and valuable contributions. In line with the other EU member states, Portugal considers of the most importance to continue the work on risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms under the Cartagena Protocol and consider the provided working document, including the draft recommendations therein, a good starting point for discussions at SBSTTA-24. Additionally, Portugal believes that the recommendation made by SBSTTA to the COPMOB should ensure the continuation of the process regarding the identification and prioritization of specific issues of LMO's risk assessment that may warrant future consideration. Capacity building, cooperation, and knowledge management should also be improved in order to address the needs of parties on LMO's risk assessment issues. In this context, the biosafety clearinghouse usability and importance should be emphasized. Portugal also welcomes the development of additional guidance materials, but would like to stress the need to make sure that all additional guidance materials must be of high technical and scientific quality and useful. In this sense, Portugal agrees on dedicated efforts on the development of additional guidance materials for the risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drives. This should be dedicated to general issues for conducting risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drives and on imminent applications, such as mosquitoes containing engineered gene drives. Portugal agreed not to develop guidance materials on living modified fish at this stage and encourage parties to collaborate and share knowledge and capacity building and also to make use of existing guidance material. We are also flexible regarding the process for developing additional guidance materials and open to views and suggestions from other parties, but would like to make some preliminary suggestions, recommendations in this regard. In particular, we recommend the use of existing guidance materials to avoid work duplication. A close collaboration between all parties and the inclusion of specific expertise and representatives from international organizations during the development of these guidance materials to ensure a successful output. Transparency. The reviewing process should involve all stakeholders, for example, an open-ended online forum, and we recommend a clear description of the role of the actors involved and the procedures of the process to ensure an efficient process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Portugal, and all parties, please indulge me on this. But we have actually four instruments, so it's always sort of a puzzle to keep the order right. That's just our situation here. So now I think we have the final sequence here. So let's hear France first, followed by Norway and then Austria. France, please raise your hand. You have the floor.
D'avoir organisé cette réunion en ligne.
Thank you very much for having organized this online session. And France supports the statement by Portugal and emphasizes the importance of continuing the work under the Cartagena Protocol on risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms. France regards working paper 24/5 as a good starting point. France recommends improving on capacity building, international cooperation, and knowledge sharing in order to support the needs that the parties have expressed for risk assessment of living modified organisms. In this respect, we underscore how important it is that any additional technical and scientific guidance material developed be of high quality and user-friendly. We support focusing efforts on the development of additional guidance material on risk assessment of organisms containing engineered gene drives. The additional guidance to be developed should, on the one hand, address common issues of a general nature regarding the conduct of risk assessments of organisms containing engineered gene drives. On the other hand, it should also give thought to applications that could emerge in the short term, such as mosquitoes containing engineered gene drives. In this respect, we are flexible on the process for implementing the development of additional guidance material. We are thus open to opinions and suggestions from the parties that would benefit the most from such guidance material. However, we are ready to make suggestions on the implementation process. In order for this process to be effective, we thus suggest that the first version of the guidance material be prepared by a small expert group. An expert subgroup of the ATEG or an expert panel established by the Secretariat could be appropriate in this context. The process of review and assessment of this work should further involve all of the stakeholders, for example, via an open-ended online forum. In order to ensure that the process is effective, France recommends clearly defining the role of the actors involved and the procedures to be implemented. Finally, as regards risk assessment of genetically modified fish, we encourage the parties to promote international cooperation, knowledge sharing, and capacity building, and also to take advantage of existing guidance material. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, France. We now move to Trondheim again. Norway, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Norway supports the proposed decisions. At this point in time, it will be highly important to develop guidance material for risk assessment of gene drive organisms under the Cartagena Protocol in order to support a robust and scientific approach to these. While fully supporting this work, is it also important to keep in mind that gene drive technology while still immature, is developing fast and is facing complex and unresolved issues, among others, how to investigate effects in the environment. A precautionary approach, in combination with the assessment of other criteria, such as ethical considerations, will therefore be important before gene-drive organisms are introduced into the environment. It will also be important with capacity building on how to perform risk assessment of gene-drive organisms according to developed guidance on how to handle uncertainty and on processes for decision-making. It is also important to keep in mind that gene-drive organisms are included as one of the topics of synthetic biology being considered under the Convention, and that there will be overlap and the potential for synergies between the knowledge base for synthetic biology and the knowledge base for risk assessments of gene-driver organisms. Norway supports an appropriate division of labor and good coordination between work under the protocol and the Convention in order to avoid unclear boundaries and possible duplication. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Norway. So next on my list is Austria, followed by the European Union and Germany. Austria, please press the raise hand button. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Austria supports the statements done by Portugal and France. And from the Austrian perspective, we think that it is vital to continue the work on risk assessment and risk management of LMOs under the Cartagena Protocol. And we consider the provided working document a good starting point for our discussions. We have a couple of drafting suggestions which we submit to the Secretariat in written form. And the main elements of these suggestions are as follows. The recommendation by SBSTTA to the COPMOP should ensure the continuation of the process established in COPMOP 9, Decision 13, for the identification and prioritization of specific issues of risk assessment of LMOs that may warrant future considerations. In this context, we think that the draft recommendation and the terms of reference of the suggested ARTEC need to be amended in order to allow a party-driven information gathering and prioritization process even beyond COPMOP 10. We recommend to improve capacity building, cooperation and knowledge management as suggested by Portugal and France. We would like to stress that any additional guidance materials developed must be of high technical and scientific quality, should be useful and applicable. Austria reiterates the importance of the precautionary approach in accordance with the Cartagena Protocol and agrees to focus the immediate efforts on the development of additional guidance materials for the risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drives. The additional guidance materials should address general issues for conducting risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drives and focus on upcoming applications in the near future, like mosquitoes containing engineered gene drives. We urge to include required specific expertise and representatives from international organizations in the drafting process. We recommend making use of existing guidance materials in order not to duplicate work. And to ensure efficient progress, we suggest performing the initial drafting in a smaller group of experts. Possible formats for such a smaller expert drafting group, for example, within an ad hoc technical expert group, may be appropriate for that purpose. However, we are ready to evaluate any other option, can be flexible on the exact format and procedures intended to warrant the necessary expertise. The process must be transparent and party-driven. The reviewing process should involve all stakeholders, for example, in an open-ended online forum. We recommend to clearly describe the process and the role of the actors involved. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Austria. Next on my list is European Union, followed by Germany and Brazil. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor again to speak on behalf of the European Union. Dear colleagues, to start, allow me to express my support for the statements given by Portugal, France, and Austria already. So also the European Union supports the continuation of work on risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms under the Cartagena Protocol. And we also want to reconfirm the precautionary approach. If additional guidance material is developed, we believe it should be of high technical and scientific quality. It should be useful and directly applicable. It should focus on upcoming applications such as mosquitoes containing engineered gene drives, and also address general issues on gene drives. As already mentioned before, we suggest a smaller group for the initial drafting group. I see my camera is off. I will try to switch it on again. Or I will continue. So to ensure an efficient process, we suggest also a smaller expert group for the initial drafting. And then these materials could then be reviewed, for example, by an open-ended online forum. The finalization of the drafting material could then be in the hands of an ATEC that then should include specific expertise from representatives from different international organizations such as WHO, IUCN. We are also ready to offer our expertise from the European Food Safety Authority, the EFSA, that may also contribute to this work. We also recommend to use existing guidance materials. Finally, all in all, to say that we are flexible with respect to the process and the exact format, but the necessary expertise should be warranted, and also the actors and the procedures should be described clearly. Finally, we trust that the process will be transparent and fully party-driven. We will also submit to the Secretariat our suggested amendments in writing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, European Union. So next on my list is Germany, followed by Brazil, and then Finland. Germany, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to say that I support the statements by my colleagues from Europe. Germany would like to thank the Secretariat for document SBSTTA-24/5 and the draft recommendations therein. It is a good starting point for discussions under this agenda. Germany supports the continuation of work on risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms under the Cartagena Protocol and the process established in decision CP 9/13. Fundamental for the implementation of the Cartagena Protocol is to continue the scientifically sound work on risk assessment and risk management of LMOs with appropriate procedures. To address the needs voiced by parties on issues of risk assessment of LMOs, we consider capacity building, cooperation, and knowledge management important tools that need to be utilized and improved. A strong biosafety clearinghouse is a key element in this context. We recommend to make use of existing guidance materials and not to duplicate work. Any additional guidance materials developed must be of high technical and scientific quality, useful and applicable. Germany agrees to focus the efforts on the development of additional guidance materials for the risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drive. The additional guidance materials should address general issues for conducting risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drive and focus on upcoming applications in the near future, like mosquitoes containing engineered gene drives. Germany is flexible with respect to the development process of additional guidance materials for the risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drives. However, it must be transparent and party-driven. Roles of actors involved need to be clearly described, and specific expertise should be included to ensure efficient progress. We are open to views and suggestions of other parties, and we are prepared to make suggestions ourselves. We stand ready and committed to elaborate further on additional guidance materials for the risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drives. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Germany. So next on my list is Brazil, followed by Finland and Mexico. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks once again for convening this informal meeting. I will present some preliminary comments on behalf of Brazil, and our official position will be presented at the formal face-to-face meeting. Brazil considers that the discussions on this topic must be approached in a balanced manner, equally presenting the potential benefits and negative impacts when using living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives. A growing body of scientific evidence has demonstrated the promising applications of gene drives, especially for the control and reduction of disease vectors that affect developing countries, or to address sustainable agriculture and foster both the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity. Brazil welcomes the discussions and outcomes of the ad hoc technical expert group on risk assessments. Regarding living modified fish, Brazil believes containment measures provide an adequate approach to prevent possible impacts on the conservation of biodiversity. We understand that existing national frameworks for living modified organisms have been able to address the risks posed by living modified fish. With reference to living modified organisms containing gene drives, Brazil believes we need to continue scientific-based discussions to achieve a comprehensive understanding of gene drives' specificities. Given the wide range of applications of engineered gene drives and their specific nature and scope, we also need to consider the significant challenges in developing a one-size-fits-all approach. This could lead to a misunderstanding of gene drives' implications and pave the way for necessary barriers to biotechnology research, development, and innovation. An efficient initiative would be to engage in improving existing risk assessment frameworks by building on available scientific evidence and considering the many types of existing gene drives to support case-by-case analysis. We look forward to contributing to further discussion. Many thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Brazil. So the order now is Finland, Mexico, and then UK. Finland, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Finland would like to thank the SBSTTA Bureau and the Secretariat for organizing this online session on SBSTTA-24. We support our colleagues from Europe who have made intervention before us. We think that it is very important to continue work on risk assessment and risk management of living modified organisms, LMOs, under the Cartagena Protocol and consider the SBSTTA document a good starting point for discussions. We support the conclusions of the ARTEC on risk assessment and risk management. We agree to focus our efforts on the development of additional guidance materials for the risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drives. These guidance materials should address general issues of LMOs containing engineered gene drives and focus on upcoming applications in near future, like mosquitoes containing engineered gene drives. Third, we reiterate decision 14/19 and emphasize a precautionary approach with respect to engineered gene drives. We support the establishment of an ARTEC and the extension of the risk assessment and risk management online forum. However, we are flexible with respect to process to be implemented for the development of additional guidance materials. We are open to views and suggestions of other parties. The development process must, however, be party-driven, transparent, should include both broad but also required specific expertise and representatives from international organizations. Finally, we think that it is of utmost importance that the recommendations by SBSTTA to COPMOP ensures the continuation of the process established in Decision 913 for the identification and prioritization of specific issues of risk assessment of LMOs that may warrant future consideration. We therefore support that parties submit to the Executive Secretary information on their needs and priorities for further guidance materials on specific topics of risk assessment of LMOs, including a rationale reflecting the criteria set out in Annex 1 of Decision 913. And that ARTEC prepares a prioritized list of topics on which further guidance materials on risk assessment may be needed based on the submissions of the parties and their national reports. We will submit our written amendments to the recommendation to the Secretariat. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Finland. So the list now reads Mexico, UK, Japan. Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Our delegation welcomes the work of the ATEG on risk assessment, as well as the contributions of the parties and organisations during the intersessional work. We wish to reiterate the importance of applying the precautionary principle given the lack of information on the effects of LMOs containing engineered gene drives on biodiversity. On paragraph 4 of the recommendations, we must recognise that there have already been and there will continue to be unintentional releases or escapes of living modified fish that spread into the environment. Therefore, we wish to make an appeal to continue working on the effects of genetically modified fish on biodiversity. Once we have more information and better documentation, especially expressed in simple language, then we will be able to take better decisions and can better effectively communicate the risks and precautionary measures to be taken, especially with regard to IPLCs. On paragraph 5 now, we support the development of guidance for the risk assessment on LMOs containing engineered gene drives, as well as to continue attaching value to the development of new guidance, including new guidance on genetically modified fish. On paragraph 6, we suggest that the terms of reference for the ATEG on developing risk assessment guidance for LMOs containing engineered gene drives should be carried out in a coordinated way with the multidisciplinary group of experts on synthetic biology. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mexico, next on my list is UK, followed by Japan and Thailand. UK, you have the floor. UK, please, you have the floor. Seems that there's an issue with the UK connection. Is it? I can't see anything. UK, are you there? UK is raising the hand. Go ahead, UK. There we are. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to begin by thanking all those that have been involved in intersessional work on risk assessment and risk management. In particular, the work of the Ad Hoc Technical Expert Group on Risk Assessment in response to decision CP 9/13, the Secretariat, and those who submitted information and contributed to the online forum. We would like to thank the governments of Germany and the Netherlands for the financial support which enabled the Executive Secretary to commission the 2 studies which informed the application of Annex 1 of Decision CP 9/13 on living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives and living modified fish. The ATEG's hard work forms the basis of the Executive Secretary's suggested recommendations. The UK is broadly supportive of the suggested recommendations outlined in CBD/SBSTTA-24/5. Key amongst those are 1, to decide not to develop at this stage additional guidance materials for the risk assessment of living modified fish, and 2, to decide to establish an ad hoc technical expert group on risk assessment to develop additional guidance materials on risk assessment for living modified organisms containing engineered gene drives. In relation to the latter, the UK notes that gene drive organisms are living modified organisms and as such will be subject to a case-by-case risk assessment under the provisions of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety and other national and international regulatory frameworks controlling the use of LMOs. The development of additional guidance materials is not a prerequisite for the introduction of engineered gene drives into the environment. In accordance with the outcome of CBD COP14, the introduction of organisms containing engineered gene drives into the environment, including for experimental releases and research and development purposes, may be carried out when A. Scientifically sound case-by-case risk assessments have been carried out, B. Risk management measures are in place to avoid or minimise potential adverse effects as appropriate. We believe that this COP decision still holds, and we will not support a recommendation which moves away from this approach. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, UK. Next on my list is Japan, followed by Thailand, and then Paraguay. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And also, I'd like to thank you for preparing and organizing this session. So I will explain our view on the suggested recommendation on risk assessment and risk management. So in conducting risk assessment and risk management of LMOs, we believe that while truly necessary guidance materials and efforts should be implemented, confusion caused by unnecessary effort and fraud of documents should be avoided. Furthermore, we believe that specific and tangible reasons should be identified for which existing guidance is not applicable. The guidance document noted in MOP 8 shows a basic evaluation method in which a possible pathway is assumed for determining the flow of impact on biodiversity after releasing the relevant organisms into the environment, and the data are used to confirm whether the assumed pathway actually occurs. So it is applicable to the evaluation of impact of biodiversity on all organisms. In the case of LMF, we recognize that there are no specific and tangible problems that make the existing guidance inapplicable. Risk assessment should be conducted on a case-by-case basis, as life history varies depending on fish species and breeding methods. In this respect, there is no different from other taxa. Therefore, we support paragraph 4 of the suggested recommendation. Secondly, we start talking about LLMOs containing gene drives. In the case of LLMOs containing gene drives, we have doubt about whether additional guidance materials are needed. In paragraph 5 of the recommendation is upheld. We would like to add some phrase to part of paragraph 6 so that the additional guidance would be simple and concise without duplication with existing guidance. In addition, we would like to propose that the holding of 2 meetings of ad hoc technical expert group on risk assessment, as described in paragraph 8D and paragraph 1B of the annex, be reduced to 1 session unless it is clearly necessary. So we will submit our comment on this agenda later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Japan. We will now hear Thailand, followed by Paraguay. Paraguay will hold the last intervention today, and Sweden will be first in line on Wednesday. Thailand, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thailand welcomes the outcome of the ARTEX on leak assessment of living modified organisms according to COP decision referred in Annex 1 of document CBD/SBSTTA-24/4. We agree with the decision of ARTEX not to develop guidance on the leak assessment of living modified fish. Thailand has an opinion that the guidance on leak assessment of living modified organisms and monitoring in the context of leak assessment developed by ARTEX can be applied to the leak assessment of living modified fish, and inviting countries with experience and practice regarding living modified fish to adopt the said guidance and sharing relevant information and recommendations through CHM. We also agree with ARTEX's decision to develop the guidance on leak assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drive and the designation of new ARTEX to develop the above-mentioned guidance as identified in TOR in the attached annex. Information on leak assessment and management should be exchanged and disseminated between parties to facilitate countries that do not have their guidance on leak assessment to adopt and apply based on their circumstances and priorities. And the existing guidance on leak assessment should be updated to effectively suitable with living organism derived from innovative technology and cover all related plants, animals, and microorganisms, field use, ecosystem use, guidance on risk assessment and risk management, which includes technologies such as genome editing or other types of synthetic biology. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Thailand. And now we'll hear Paraguay, and that will be the last intervention for the day before we resume on Wednesday. And after Paraguay, I will give the floor to our chairman, Mr. Hezekiel Benitez. Paraguay, you have the floor, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Paraguay believes that it's not necessary to set up another ATEG to work on developing guidance on engineered gene drives. There are other mechanisms that can be used and that are more efficient and costless. The ATEGs have taken over 7 years to produce the risk assessment guidance, and when they were finalised, it wasn't possible to reach consensus amongst the parties. We recommend that we should take account of this experience and look to find other mechanisms to meet the parties' needs on this matter. If, in spite of what I've just said, the parties agree on setting up an ATEG, we need to consider the following 3 points, in fact. Firstly, the question of composition experience. The ATEG should include sectors that are directly involved in working with gene drive-based technology. Secondly, on the timing aspect, the ATEGs, in accordance with the established provisions, should be time limited, in line with what was concluded in MOP 11. Thirdly, in terms of the scope, the work should be limited to developing guidance for the environmental risk assessment of LMOs containing engineered gene drives and should not be expanded to gene drives in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paraguay. So the order for Wednesday is Sweden, Jordan, Belarus, Italy, Malawi, China, Belgium, Switzerland, and then Cuba. So it's now close to 10 a.m. and we would need to close this session. So I will now hand back to our substitute chair. I thank the substitute chair and my colleagues in the Bureau for giving me the opportunity to chair this session, and I thank you all for your cooperation. Chair, please.
Thank you, Gaute, and many thanks to Marina and yourself for chairing these first 3 agenda items so effectively. I would also like to thank all parties and observers for their important contributions and cooperation in keeping to time. I noted yesterday on agenda item 3, we heard from 44 parties and 18 observers. Nevertheless, there were some observers who could not take the floor because of the lack of time. Hopefully, if we progress well in our agenda next week, we may find some time when we can hear from some additional observers on this item. So I ask you for your cooperation to make this gap. In this case, in any case, the written statements have been posted on the website. Dear colleagues, we have completed our work for this week. Please know that there will be no informal sessions of SBSTA on Monday 22nd, on Tuesday 23rd February, to overlap with UNEA 5. We will reconvene on Wednesday, 24 February at 7 a.m. Montreal time, when we will complete this agenda item on risk assessment with Gaute, followed by item 6 on the formal SBSTA provisional agenda on marine and coastal biodiversity that will be chaired by SBSTA Bureau member Ms. Marie-May Musungale from the Seychelles. I wish you all a nice and well-deserved weekend. The meeting